We are in the early stages of X-Men From the Ashes, the attempt to rebuild the X-Men franchises after the failed Krakoan era. That certainly got some people excited, but turned far too many people off. And there's one man out there that's been tasked with the job. His name is Tom Brevoort. He's an executive editor at Marvel Comics, and now he's in charge of the X-Men. Mr. Brevoort, I will give him this. He at least identified some of the real issues with the Krakoan era, especially when we got to the end state of it. It not only didn't feel like X-Men, it didn't feel like heroes anymore. It didn't feel like superheroes. And he did identify some real major issues that needed to be fixed. The way the line was managed at the end, I think, was truly awful. And I imagine even the most ardent supporter of Krakoa were like, oh gosh, this is not exactly a pleasant experience. And he also even addressed recently the QR code controversy, where somebody went probably a little too far on him. And he had a very cordial, kind response. So I'll give a tip to the cap to Mr. Brevoort a little ahead of time before we get to that last subject. But this is all coming from his Man with the Hat Substack. I will also give him this. He's very transparent, or at least open with this dialogue discussion, pointing out why he's doing things, what he's doing, and what you can expect, and is certainly more forthright with information than almost anybody else out there in comic books. So another tip to the cap to Mr. Brevoort. I might not love everything that he's doing, but I do appreciate being open and honest about it. Now let's talk about the major issues that he's looking to fix and address with X-Men From the Ashes. Laying out his philosophy on X-Men and killing. This is what Brevoort said in his newsletter. I don't think the X-Men should be casual or gleeful killers. While they have certainly been in situations where lethal force was called for and appropriate over the years, I don't think this should be their default setting. And one of my big complaints about the end of the Orcus War was in how readily and even joyfully some of the X-Men murdered their foes. That's fine for some of the characters. Nobody is going to question Wolverine killing a bunch of guys, though I feel even he has certain rules of engagement, which he will honorably try to follow. But seeing Nightcrawler teleport a couple of hapless Orcus goons into space and leave them to die just felt wildly out of character and wrong to me. If our heroes are going to be heroes, then they have to be held to a higher standard than that. We said it a lot back in Deathlock 30 plus years ago. You've got to do what's right, not what's easiest. I'm sure that we'll have plenty of moral gray area that we can explore, but I do think that the days when the X-Men would casually throw around lethal force and laugh about it thereafter are over now. And that is a change that I personally appreciate, because it did feel so weird. And the main culprit really was Jerry Duggan, but other people were doing it as well within the X-Men line, especially during the Fall of X. You know, when he mentions Nightcrawler grabbing those guys and essentially teleporting them into space, leaving there and then bouncing back to die, I was like, you know, Nightcrawler is my guy. That's my favorite X-Men hero. And it's like, Nightcrawler would never do that. But there were so many instances, even with a character like Wolverine. And if you go back and read the Claremont stuff and, you know, even the Mark Miller stuff, sure, Wolverine would kill people. But a lot of times, Wolverine wouldn't use lethal force either. He would use the amount of force necessary to remove somebody from, like, the battle space. Like, it would be part of his internal monologue, really, like, yeah, you know, he's not going to die, but he ain't going to be able to get back in the fight today, kind of thing. And that would be an ever-present part of Wolverine's kind of inner monologue, is how he was dispatching his foes, basically without killing them. Now, certainly he's become more of a cold-blooded killer over time. That's a little bit more part of the character. But even when Colossus was throwing Wolverine at the Orcus goons with his knives out, and they were trying to rename it from the fastball special to something else, because he was literally shredding them like cabbage, felt grossly inappropriate for the story being told and the heroes that were part of it. Now, Colossus wouldn't be a part of that. That's not who Colossus is. He wouldn't gleefully do any of this stuff. And it just felt really out of character for him. I thought the weirdest one probably was Kitty Pryde. And this sequence of events, if you've never read X-Men 25 from Jerry Duggan, I don't suggest that you do, but you're probably going to remember where she just goes on this enormous killing spree and was like phasing guns into people's heads and then phasing them into sidewalks and then phasing people into each other and all this kind of stuff, and using her power in a very, you know, just kind of gross, murderous way. And then at the end, she didn't even use her power. She actually just used her bare hands and broke a guy's neck. felt so unheroic. And I think Mark Millar has a good way of putting this. Heroes kill, but superheroes don't. You can like John Wick and you can watch that movie and you'll be like, man, I think he's killed like 800 people now because of one dog, but I still kind of like him. But he's not a superhero. He's kind of that morally gray character operating in a different world that doesn't live up to the level of moral code or ethical code that a superhero does, where basically killing should be the very last resort. And you shouldn't be joking about it or smiling about it. I just remember like Emma Frost and Kitty Pryde and some of the other characters were just so happy about the amount of people that they were killing. And it just kind of made you feel gross on the inside. And it sounds like it also made Tom Brevoort feel that way. And that's one of those things that wasn't an X-Men problem. Like, it wouldn't work for anybody. That was just bad writing, bad greenlighting on the part of Jordan White that never, ever should have been allowed to happen. But these people don't know what heroism is. They don't understand what superheroes are supposed to represent. And they basically turn them into just complete villains in that story. And that's why it's so hard to redeem them in the current state of X-Men, because you saw what they did. You saw Wolverine just slicing people to pieces and Colossus taking great joy in it, and Nightcrawler of all people just murdering people, and Kitty Pryde just misusing her great power and great responsibility to such a degree that it's hard to really root for them, which is really one of the anchors that's weighing down the From the Ashes era. And that's why I don't really reconcile what Tom's talking about there when he talks about this here, answering another question. He was asked, I keep hearing about how the point of this new line of X books is meant to have something for everyone. As you felt like Krakoa didn't have wide enough appeal, I'm just wondering if you have any context of the early Krakoa era, as it's been said pretty explicitly by Jordan White and Jonathan Hickman, that the point of the initial Krakoa launch was to have at least one book that would appeal to everyone. This is what Brevoort said. That may have been the point, even what was laid out in those early books, and I don't really want to disparage any of it, but what I can tell you is that I'm far from the only person who felt like all the X titles during the end portion of that era tended to slosh together a little bit, and all of them seemed to revolve around Krakoa business, as they sort of had to given the setup, so we're working to try and remedy that. And he's right on the money there. It was so hard to get through all the books because there was nothing really unique about him. Even a book like Wolverine, the Wolverine solo book, obviously they ended it on Sabretooth War, and all of a sudden the fucking Exiles are in there. Like, why is this even happening? And it's supposed to be all happening during the fall of X and tying together, and it made it so unenjoyable. Like, there's no fun in reading Immortal X-Men, which is like a companion book to Rise of the Powers of 10 or whatever. It sucked. Mother Righteous was a fucking slog character to get through, and X-Men Red kind of sucked, and they all end up kind of converging on each other to make this enormous just smorgasbord of shitty fucking characters and shitty stories and stuff you didn't want to invest in, that it was real work getting through it. Like, when X-Men or Uncanny X-Men 700, X-Men 35, the last book of the Krakoan era happened, I was so excited and happy that I wasn't going to have to revisit Krakoa again. Like, I was just so done with it. I remember how excited I was during House of X Powers of 10 and how great it was. And you're like, well, this feels like it's too big out the gate, but I think Hickman's going to pull it through. And then you get to, Ten of Swords, and you're like, man, this isn't really going to work. And then Hickman leaves, and it's just so many bad events and terrible stories and worse creators coming in over time that I don't ever want to see it again. But when you go in and look at the books that they've released thus far, X-Men #1, Phoenix #1, NYX #1, X-Force #1, Uncanny X-Men #1, what's the one thing that all these books have in common? They've all got an X in the title, and they're basically all about Krakoa. Where's the book for somebody that never ever wants to think about Krakoa again? Like most X-Men fans, I just want X-Men books. I understand all the stuff that was happening there. It was big level stuff, and it played out in a very horrific, terrible fashion that was greatly unsatisfying or unappealing to almost anybody, even the most ardent supporters of X-Men in Krakoa can freely admit Fall of X sucked. I want to move on. Every one of these books, to a degree, are so tied into Krakoa, I find it nauseating. And Tom Brevoort saying, well, the problem with all the books before was that they were all tied into Krakoa. Well, they're still all tied into Krakoa, man. Let it go. It sucks. No, if you wanted to continue on with the legacy of Krakoa, forging new paths and stuff like that, like if you had one book where the heroes all still believed in it and they were doing X-Men business from that perspective, and then you had one book where you had people that were like, I kind of understand what Krakoa was and I understand why it went wrong, but I believe in Charles Xavier still, and they were going in that direction. And then you had another team that fully realized, oh my goodness, look what Nightcrawler did. Look what Colossus did. Look what we did in the name of Krakoa. This was disgusting. We can never let this happen again, and have that perspective. At least there would be different perspectives on it, and that would bring them into conflict with each other over time, and potentially, there would be, resolution and all that kind of stuff. But everybody's just like, man, Krakoa is the best. It sucks that Krakoa's not there. And I'm going, you guys fucking murdered a lot of people. And those books sucked. They weren't fun to read. Why are we going back to where everyone has the exact same opinion and perspective on Krakoa if you're going to make it a vital point of the new line From the Ashes? Like, you got to do something to mix it up. And while there are some books out there, and I would say Uncanny X-Men is the closest thing to a good book, and it is very close, like the legacy of Krakoa, that cloud that's sitting over it that they continuously shove into the books, sucks. Get your head out of your ass, Brevoort. Listen to yourself. And what you said was the main reason that line, while cohesive, really sucked to read. And remove Krakoa from all of this stuff. If you want to have a couple of Krakoa perspective books, like NYX or Exceptional X-Men or something, go for it. Otherwise, just give me the fucking X-Men at this point, because I think we've all suffered enough. And that's why, I just find that comment frustrating, because now we're 5 books into it, and they have one real thing that's connecting them all. It's Krakoa, the thing that destroyed them in the first place. Now, there has been a lot of blowback on the QR codes, and this person, I think his name was Henry, might have gone a little bit too far. He said, F you and your QR codes. I just canceled my Marvel titles because of your stupid idea. I hope you get fired. Then I hope you lose all your money and are living on the streets. And when you're at the homeless shelter, I hope they make you scan a QR code to get some soup. But since you're broke and have no phone, they won't let you have any. So it's dumpster food for you. Anyways, again, F you. And this was Brevoort's response. I really need to give you proper points for cleverness, Henry. This is a funny little note. On the other hand, if you're demanding that people be fired and left destitute and homeless because they gave you bonus material, but you don't like the way in which it was done, then I'm sorry. Your priorities might just be a little bit askew, but you do you. Which I do think is probably as polite as you can be to the comments there. And I do understand, and I don't think Tom Brevoort is truly acknowledging what's being done here with the QR codes and why people don't like them. They're not bonus material. You're taking a page of the comic book and you're removing it and you're putting it behind a QR code for no reason whatsoever. No one's going to like that. No one was ever going to like it. You have an incomplete book. It just sucks. And now you're having to add devices to your reading experience. There's many reasons to dislike this QR code. Do I think that Henry went a little too far? Perhaps. Most likely he went a little too far. If you want to cancel your Marvel orders, and I've certainly heard from plenty of people who are like, you know what? I took them off my pull list. I don't want to deal with this stuff, and I don't want to be seen supporting it. I think that is a stance worth taking if it means that much to you. Me personally, I just act like the page isn't there, and mostly I'm just, kind of relieved that I'm done with the book a page early, other than Uncanny X-Men, which I do think was solid. But I don't want anybody to be destitute and broke. I don't wish bad things on people, even if I think they're bad writers or they've done a bad job, or even if they're coming from a place that I think is less than honorable, or being honest and forthright about stuff. I don't want bad things to happen to people, good or bad. That's kind of my stance. In my ideal world, even the people that I think are bad writers, Colin Kelly, Jackson Lanzig, Tom King, Brian Michael Bendis, Steve Fox, Stephanie Phillips, who's some other bad writers out there, Celeste Bronfman, Jadzia Axelrod. The industry would be so healthy and robust and lively right now, and there would be so much interest in Marvel, DC, and the indie publishers out there that they would still, be able to have families and have an apartment or buy a house and stuff like that and have a car and not have to worry about stuff. I want people to be successful. I've never wished ill on people. That's just not how I roll. But obviously some people are taking a little bit more personally. I understand why people are very upset about the QR codes. Me personally, would I pull a book off the pull list if I was liking it because of QR codes? I wouldn't, because I don't think it's that serious. But I do think that Mr. Brevoort probably should take this a little bit more seriously and own up to it and realize that you're not giving bonus material. Bonus material are interviews. Bonus material are pencils and inks. Bonus material isn't the last page of the comic book. You're putting it behind a wall to stop spoilers, which it doesn't stop. So there you go. He finally addressed the QR code stuff again. Doesn't seem like he's taking it too seriously. And I will give Henry points as well. That was pretty funny. You end up at the homeless shelter, but you have to use a QR code. But you're so broke you don't have a phone and you get no soup. I'm playing it full circle there. But I'm not taking it that seriously, even though I understand why people are very upset. So those are some of my issues that I guess I share with Tom Brevoort regarding the end of Krakoa, and some of the issues that I think are still present in From the Ashes that I think Tom isn't realizing he's also guilty of. The X-Men should not be just killing people and being happy about it. We should get past Krakoa and leave it in the rearview mirror unless we want to have differentiating points of view for complex actual storytelling that could be compelling, because this isn't compelling so far. And Brevoort should acknowledge that the QR codes were a bad idea because people hate them. And in the end, the customer is always right. And they're the ones that are telling him it was a bad idea. If you'd like more conversations about the X-Men and all comic books, Marvel, DC, all that kind of stuff, and you like what I'm doing here, providing an honest perspective on the comic book industry and all the stuff around it, like movies, video games, all that kind of stuff, and you would like to support me in that mission, I do invite you to come over to Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. And we got so many podcasts, over 34 hours of new podcasts every single month now, featuring your favorite guests like Doc, Aaron Sparrow, Jim, obviously myself. I'm running that show. If you like more of that, like I said, I hope to see you at the Patreon.